Thank you for that wonderful introduction, and I'm truly excited and honored to have been accepted to earn this award. Part of my passion in life is broadening participation, is creating space for all of us to be able to be welcomed into the STEM workforce, to be welcomed into the innovation that we can all bring, that diversity brings to us in STEM. And so today, I want to talk about Believe Without Boundaries. That's going to be the crux of what I do. My task is really simple, to give a talk about strategies and implementations that I use to really break down systemic barriers against scientists and students from historically marginalized groups. And so what is it that I do in order to make that happen? What strategies, what implementations? And in a nutshell, you can say it's this: believe without boundaries. And so I want to give you a story and then a framework for some toolkits that you can use in your own practice to believe without boundaries and open and create gateways for everyone to pursue a career in STEM. So I made an observation. My first year at Rhodes College, 2015, my very first year I taught nothing but biochemistry courses. And I taught 100 students in there, and only 5 looked like me. I said, well, this is a predominantly white institution, so maybe that's normal. But then the next year, very first semester, fall semester, I taught Foundations of Chemistry, which is our general chemistry course. And I walked in, and on day 1, I looked up and said, no, there's enough of them in here that I should have more at the back end. And so I started to wonder what was going on because somebody was exiting the system. And so I collected some data and found out that our Black and African American students were twice as likely to not finish the chemistry sequence. And so that was like, whoa, we need to do something about that. And so I pulled out an idea that I had thought of in 2006 when I was my first round in graduate school, and I said, I need to build a mentoring program here. This is exactly what needs to happen. So I scheduled that program to be started fall 2023 because I was expecting to make tenure spring 2023. But in fall 2017, a group of students came along who were just dynamic. And I said, if there was ever a group of students that I could start this program with, this is the group. And so I prayed about it and then went forward. And so the mission of this program is to draw out each student's potential. That's the goal, and this is the group of the inaugural edition. Here's the impact. We're now 7 years in to running this program, and these are the first 3 graduating cohorts, 2021, 2022, and 2023. We've had 84 graduates come out of the program. We've now served 201 students. There are 113 still on campus. And this is dynamic to just see this excellence and this success of these students from underrepresented backgrounds all pursuing STEM careers. And so what were some of the highlights and impacts? Right now, the Rhodes graduation rate is 83% for all students. The STEM cohort students graduate at 96%. That's substantial. In chemistry, between 2004 and 2020, we had a graduation rate of 53% for Black and African American students. Through the program, we now have a graduation rate of 84%. In STEM in general, at the college, we had a graduation rate of 78% for Black and African American students. Now that graduation rate is 89%. Those are substantial jumps. And not only that, but the students stay the course. The retention rate for the students is 99% for their first year and 98% through senior year. That's magnificent. What was even so more exciting was between that time, 2004, 2020, none of the students that were graduating in chemistry who were Black and African American were graduating with honors. And so I would be on the graduation stage counting, well, who's summa cum laude, who's magna cum laude, who's cum laude, who has a job, and there was none. And so now we have students who are being inducted to the Rhodes Hall of Fame. We had the first William Randolph Spendell awardee in chemistry, and I think in math as well. Each year from 2021, we have broken the last year's record of students from underrepresented backgrounds graduating with STEM degrees at Rhodes College. And we are on pace again for the 4th year in a row to break that record. And so for me, though, the most seminal highlights and impacts is what it does for the students. This student said, it gave me a sense of purpose and belonging at Rhodes. It was my driving force to stay. This student said, it literally created the confidence I have in myself in the field of pretty much everything. And this student said it made them more passionate and determined to go into a STEM field. I belong in a STEM major. That's substantial. That's transformative change. And so what we do in this program is to go beyond the second RMP. We're always talking about recruiting and retaining, getting people to pursue and persist. I don't care about that. I like to think about resilience and prospering, and that's the third level, because you can survive something and not thrive. I don't want my students to just survive Rhodes College or just survive STEM. I want them to thrive here. And so I focus on resilience and prospering. So how do I do that? Let's get to the toolkits. That's just some great things. I love mnemonics, and so you'll see a lot of that in here, alliteration. So I'm going to talk about the ABCs to this. So first there's agency. And when we think about agency, we oftentimes think about agency on the part of the student, but that's not what I mean. I mean agency on the part of the faculty member, the research mentor, the agency of the STEM professional. What are we doing to make it part of our everyday inner being essence to go out and pursue these students? In my course, one way I use agency is by establishing a curriculum that is inviting and that also allows people to see what they could do with a career in chemistry. So this is my lab course, and the way I've broken it up is I divide it into sections: chemistry and government, chemistry and academia, chemistry and industry, because I want them to know that chemists, biochemists, molecular biologists, we can do so many different things and we go so many different places. And so the labs that they do, everything starts with the career connection. Why would I ever titrate something? Why would I ever want to develop a drug? Why would I want to do those things? We got to make it real. And so in doing this, they leave my lab not just with a set of skills, because in first year chemistry, no one is mastering all of the techniques, but what they can take away is what I can use a career in chemistry for, and that's my goal. So then the next thing is building a base. In building a base, how are we getting people to enter into this field? How are we creating an opportunity for them to see themselves in STEM? And so I do this project called the Chem Tutorials Project. And what the students do is they have to research chemists of color. We have an actual conversation, 2-day conversation in class about diversity in STEM, women in chemistry, diverse minds in chemistry, thinking about that. And they have to interview a chemist of color and do a number of different things. But the impact of that is this. These are some of the takeaways the students said. They said, I think the Chem Tutorials Project and our conversations on diversity were one of the things that I found really enjoyable and impactful. I really do believe it's important to foster the conversation on diversity, especially in STEM classes. And that's not something we typically do. It made me feel acknowledged and like I belong. That's key. And so the next thing is chemistry connections. Chemistry has to become real. It needs to leap off the pages of the textbook and work in your lives, and you get to see how it affects your community and how it affects you. And so what I do is I make sure those connections are made. This is a screenshot from my phone when we had the 2020 pandemic. We knew in March everything shut down. We sent all the students home. And I was teaching Foundations of Chemistry lab. I was teaching a freshman lab, and I was like, all right, we got a week to figure out how to change the rest of the course and make it meaningful. It's like, what do I do? And so I was like, I got on Zoom with the students and said, I don't feel like watching a video of titration. I don't want to watch it. And I certainly don't really think that if you watch this video of titration that you'll actually be able to titrate, because you got to miss that point the first couple of times to know to slow down. And so there is nothing that you could learn. I said, you get this concept, but you can't do it. So why don't we do drug design? Let's do some drug design. And they were like, okay. They weren't super excited like I was. I was like, okay, great. So they took the bait. This is great. I also developed this project because of one student in the classroom who came in after I introduced a new computational lab, comes into my office, could you design a drug with this? Could you do this with that? Could you like work with car cells? And I was like, this kid is a scientist and doesn't know it yet, right? And so I need to develop some better research project into this class. So I was already thinking about how do I create another opportunity for him to see a little bit more. So the students worked on those projects and they ended up publishing their work. This work was published in 2020, where these freshmen and sophomores, primarily, actually designed some COVID drugs. We took those drugs that they designed to the lab, and they worked. And so these students are now co-inventors on our patent application for these COVID drugs, and that's phenomenal. That made the chemistry real. And for the students, I then said, okay, well, if the freshmen and sophomores can do it, certainly my biochemistry class can do it. So they designed peptides for coronavirus and got that work published. But it made the chemistry real. Some of the students said this set them really considering to do a career in research, to pursue a career in this field, and that's what we want. This student said it was a great way for us to stay engaged and ended up with us making fascinating discoveries. Fascinating discoveries. We need to be intentional about creating space for discovery and inspiration. That's toolkit number 1, making meaning. Toolkit number 2, mentoring materials. Advocacy, building bridges, and creating community. In advocacy, we have to have an opportunity to connect students to resources. And so part of the advocacy work that I do through my mentoring program is making sure that they're connected to all the graduate schools, all the health profession schools, CV workshops, resume workshops, personal statement workshops, connecting them to opportunities and resources so that they get the tools they need. And I pursue the students because I don't believe that most high school students coming out know the value of having a mentor. So I don't wait for them to figure out that that's an important piece of life and being successful. And so I also help them to build out a mentoring network. You can't have just one mentor, you need many. And so in this, it connects them by building bridges. They start to meet new people, meet new individuals in the STEM community who can help foster their STEM development and STEM identity. And so if you're ever interested in reaching out, I also always collect connections at these things. So that's the email, stem@rhodes.edu. But the other thing is creating community. We have fun with them. We get all the students together. We have these STEM study snack breaks for just an hour during finals week because then we need to kick them out so they can go study again. But we bring the faculty there. And we play spades, which I think is a life skill. And I always do the spades tutorial because a lot of them come in and don't know how to play. And I'm like, you have to know that, spades and dominoes. And so they come out, we have fun, but it's the community, that sense of community that they're able to build. And so it's fun that they get to do all of this. You need to be intentional about creating space for development and investment. How do we invest in our students? And so mindset matters. That's toolkit number 3. And so we have asset affirmation, creating culture, and believe without boundaries. When we think about asset affirmation, we have to value what everybody is bringing to the table. And everybody is bringing something to the table. We do not admit students to our institutions that we don't believe are capable of accessing the full curriculum. And so we need to think about that. If we are admitting them, it's because we believe they have some assets to be able to be successful here. And so it has to be an intentional program, however. And so this is the mentoring structure. This is a 4-year mentoring goals, 5 mentoring goals a year to help foster their affirmation in STEM and to acknowledge the assets that they have. Then there's the creating the culture. I want them to change their mindset from I can't do it to I can do it. Just clip away the T so we can build their resilience and their prospering. And I also want them to see themselves. This is the first group picture that we had of the STEM cohort. There's 63 of the students of the 108 that were on campus around that time. It's hard to collect 100 bodies at one point. But this is the one, like, I need everybody here for this picture. It's like, and so when they saw themselves together, they were like, oh my gosh, I didn't know there were so many of us. And so that's different when you walk back into the classroom, knowing that you're 63, 100 deep. There's a ton of us in here. Be intentional about creating space for direction and insight. That's an important key of believing without boundaries. Now, if you noticed, right, the first two were ABC, and this one's ACB, but I have to end with believe without boundaries because that's the name of the talk, so it has to be that way, right? It's how it has to go. But there's some sense to that as well. Let's review our toolkits. Number one, making meaning. We want to be intentional about that, creating space for discovery and inspiration. Agency on our part, not just requiring our students to be the go-getters. They don't all know that they're supposed to be here. If I'm a first-generation college student, I may not pursue you because I don't know the hidden culture of the college campus. And so we've got to sometimes be that one that's out there finding them. Building a base, creating the opportunities for them to start getting established in that space in chemistry. The Chem Tutorials project that was done, the interviews that they had, they were interviewing like the director of the FDA, people all over North America, people who are present. The last one, last year, we had to get security clearance for one of the students who was able to interview one of the members in the White House. And I was like, I would love to have this interview. I'm gonna help you fill this out so they know that you're not taking the American data someplace else. But it was great. And then making it real. Chemistry has to connect to something because why am I learning what's on the pages of this textbook? It's gotta be real. Mentoring materials, be intentional about creating space for developing and investing. We need to be advocates. We have to build bridges. We have to create that community. And then mindset matters. The way we do this, the way we change our mindsets to how we should pursue this is important. Making sure we're giving direction and insight, that there's some structure behind that, building and understanding and appreciating everyone's assets, creating that culture and believing without boundaries. So the first one is ABC, and then we have ABC, but then we have ACB. And I like it that way because if we could ever get out of the one-size-fits-all model, we could probably transform more lives of people entering STEM. I did not have the one-size-fits-all model. My first graduate advisor told me I didn't have what it takes to make it in her lab and that I had to leave. And so I had to reroute back to my undergraduate institution, get in the master's program there, and then try and find another way into a PhD program. And when Randy Watkins from the University of Mississippi came recruiting graduate students at Prairie View A&M University while I was in their master's program, I asked, hey, I'd love to do research for you this summer, a suggestion my mother gave me. And he was like, yes, and then come into the PhD program in the fall. Because my professors at Prairie View had already, without me knowing, had been recommending me to him as he was doing the tour with them. They still believed without boundaries that I could do this. And that was important. 3 graduate schools, I still finished, but it wasn't the straight and narrow path that we always see for everyone. And we need to share those stories. And we need to understand that there are different paths to being successful. And so I believe one of the most important things that we can do to encourage and equip people to pursue careers in STEM is for us to equip ourselves to believe without boundaries. That's the piece that we have to get to, believing without boundaries. And so with that, I'll take any questions that you have.